For the first sketchbook I've ever finished in my entire life, I wanted to do a flip-through tour. This is a wonky book, y'all. I started it in 2009, finished it in 2023. A 14-year journey, and it's gonna look like it. I have obviously a passion for flowers. There's quite a few flower illustrations or paintings in here. You can see I was exploring all kinds of weirdness. This is 2009. I don't even know. It was brush pens, I think. And pages that I didn't like and I left. This is old. I went back and I just used them to explore things with. I started the artist way in 2009. I 100% agree with this statement. I don't like any of this lettering at all. And it's nice to see how much I've grown in 14 years. I did back and front on every page of this sketchbook, and I want to think, yeah, I was constantly testing things out. There's no actual date order. Like these two pages, I think they're just super cool. Very 70s vibe going on with both of them. I was playing with a variety of supplies actually here. These are more recent. I think these might have been in 2020 or so. Just different kinds of watercolor play, brush pen play. I got a Pentel brush pen while I was working in this book, and I played with it a lot. Marks, lots of marks. I was struggling to figure out what does it mean for me to work in a sketchbook. This says, I don't know if you can read it, I make decent I was playing with some acrylic ink turned into flowers. This, don't know what that was, also acrylic ink play. Looks kind of groovy, very underwater vibe going on there. And there's a lot of brush mark play. I was testing out all of my brushes. I was finding that if I just started painting, even if it didn't make any sense, but it became kind of references for myself, I would do more art in here. I think I started to do some classes here and there, online classes, because that says color meditation. I took notes. I'm a big note taker in sketchbooks because I may forget what I was thinking. Obviously, I did as I was here. But as I went further along, I started taking more notes. This, I do remember, was a page that was a total disaster. And so I decided to continue making it a total disaster. And I absolutely think I achieved that goal. This was some color mixing. I was playing with some Tambi Ganzai paints, trying to get a really unique neutral, and all of these colors involved created that color there. I loved doing that in this sketchbook. This doesn't look like much. Actually kind of looks like, I guess, like trash to some people, but for me, I was discovering what my larger brushes did, and this was with like a mop brush that had barely any paint on it, and I just loved this. And I went on to explore that in bigger paintings. This definitely, if I read here, yep, color meditations. This was, I think, with Lisa Solomon. I really enjoy her meditations on color, and I think this one turned out super fun. And I rarely use warm colors, so I really enjoyed doing that. I think this was another online class. It's hard to say. I was exploring doing blind contour. So that's where you're looking at your subject, but you're not looking at your page. And I'd done that with drawing, but I had never done that with painting. So this was a blind contour of a rose that I brought in from my garden. And this is semi-blind. So that was kind of awesome for me to see my hand be able to do things without my eyes, and it still had a semblance of what it was supposed to be, or quote unquote supposed to be. So yeah, let's keep moving through. This was another color meditation, which I found really fun to do because these are all color mixes along the way that I hadn't really been thinking about. And I think I did this leading up to starting back to school as an art student. So this gave me some confidence that I already had some color mixing experience in my head just from doing my coloring work, like coloring and coloring books and creating coloring books. Yeah, this was another semi-blind, I want to say. I was working only in blue, which I thought was fun. This was playing with some watercolor paint that someone had gave me. I think these are called, did I say what it was? That would have been nice if I said what it was. Peerless watercolors, which I had never tried. They're like on pieces of paper, and the colors were way brighter than I expected. I started to explore more flower work with this sketchbook, but my favorite note here is, and I don't know if you can read that, but it says, "Don't leave open a sketchbook near oil pastels," which is what that is. I dropped a pastel. I really liked this. I thought it turned out like a fun little study of echinacea, and yep, I destroyed it with my open book next to my oil pastels where I dropped it. This was another Lisa Solomon color meditation. I highly recommend getting her book and just kind of exploring the idea. It's this way, because I was beginning to study flowers of a different variety and getting ready for my latest card color, not colorable card collection, but a commission about flowers. And my friend was sending me flowers from the Pacific Northwest that I'd never seen before. Like this one only drooped down. It was really interesting. So I was drawing them. More blind contours and semi-blind contours, which I think are super fun to do. They're really fun to do with like splashy flowers that don't really have a defined shape. This was last summer. This is a blind contour of one of my husband's, he loves to grow daylilies, and they bloom in the heat of the Texas sun, and this is the semi-blind of the daylily, which looks really messy, I think, on the camera, but I'm actually kind of happy with how I was able to achieve this, not really looking at my paper. And I think I must have been using some watercolor crayons at the same time. This is just randomness. I just drew some lines and I started to color. This, I think, is actually shadows that I eventually brought, either colored pencils or it might have been some palette cleansing. I tend to, when I have things like this, I take my palettes that I've used for other projects and I start to paint stuff with old paint on a palette to clean it, because I hate just washing the paint off. I probably need to get used to that, but I can't. I'm not there yet. This is one of my favorite trees in my backyard, and I was exploring my Pentel brush pen. I think I might have even used, does it say here? Yeah, these are watercolor pencils, not watercolor paint, because I was painting outside, and that's a little more complicated to do with a paint palette. At least the ones I have are too big. So I take watercolor pencils outside instead. And this is also in my backyard, and I really like this. Now, is this here? No, my house isn't that cool, but I wanted it to be that cool, and so I did. That's the beauty of sketching. It doesn't have to look exactly like its subject that I'm talking about. These are actually in my backyard. This is not. More blind contour work, and I think this was blind and blind, different material. This was, I think, a pencil and my Pentel brush, and this was absolutely 100%. I was looking at my subject and finding all the tiny details. These are some, I think my husband calls these gentleman's buttons, which doesn't make any sense to me because they look nothing like, oh, perhaps a gentleman would put that in his button. That makes more sense. Hearing me hope my revelations online here are mildly interesting. I took this journal all over the United States with me this past year. I did a lot of the work in this sketchbook this year. This was on a journey to move my son across the country. I think I was flying from Texas to Chicago, I want to say, and my view, and on turbulence. I enjoyed coloring it too, so I would draw this and then I'd also color it on my flight back home. And this, my brain couldn't do a whole lot on our flight later on, so I just started doing simple things, and this was done with watercolor pencils, not watercolors, and I was just exploring. I think I brought 6 of them with me, and I was mixing and matching them to create color wheels to see how many colors I could actually bring in just having only like 5 or 6 pencils. This, I actually was using paint, my travel palette, while my son was packing himself up from Chicago. I had nothing to do. So I sat there while he did the work, because it's his stuff, and I just played with paint off in a corner. Kind of uncomfortable since there was no furniture. All my memories are in this book. What does it say here? Waiting around for Sam to clean up his apartment in Chicago, watching paint smoosh and drip, and I'm trying to stave off the frustration. Yeah, that's why I write things down, because it makes me laugh later. This was another flight back, and if I remember right, I was exhausted and I just started drawing shapes. I thought I was going to paint this in eventually, but I quite frankly just like it the way it is. Kind of expressed fully what I felt at that time. This is one of my first, maybe my only, I don't know how I feel about drawing drawing food I'm about to eat. But my husband and I, we were married 27 years this year, and that apparently is the sculpture anniversary. So we sculpted, that's how we interpreted, sculpted butter and made in croissants for the first time. Really flat ones. We've gotten better since, but that was, I thought, I should immortalize that in paper. Then we had to move my child to San Francisco, and I did another one of those color wheels with a completely different collection of watercolor pencils, because I found it so satisfying, especially when the planes got really bumpy, because I don't like turbulence. And then later on the flights back, I added color using one of the in-flight cups as my water cup. This was the view from our hotel in Burlingame, California, which I highly recommend staying in instead of San Francisco. It's just outside of San Francisco, but is way cheaper. And we had a fabulous view of this bird preserve that was right next to where the planes were coming in. And we're all bird nerds and plane nerds, so it was like the best. And I wanted to immortalize it. I only had like 5 minutes for this sketch, but I wanted to make sure I remembered all the many, many, many pelicans, because they were fascinating. And let's see, I'm getting close to the end. This was the flight back after we dropped my son off to live in San Francisco for graduate school, and I just drew lots of triangles. We had a very stressful flight coming back because the weather all over the country was bad and causing things to be delayed. And triangles, for me, represent my family, because we are a triangle family. There are 3 of us. That makes 6. 3 of us. And I just kind of wanted to meditate on that as I flew back home, as our triangle was changing shape once again. It used to go from Texas to Chicago back to Texas, and now it goes from Texas to San Francisco back to Texas. I'm assuming San Francisco's over here and Chicago's over here, but you get what I mean. So I thought I was going to color all of them in, but I really like the way this looks as it is, so I'm calling it quite finished. This was actually this past fall. I've always wanted to sketch my pumpkins. My husband and I are kind of gourd obsessed whenever the fall season comes around, so we got all the pumpkins, and this is the first year we actually drew them. I always want to draw them, so I took them outside to our rotten stump and had just a wonderful, colorful afternoon. And this is the last page. I used this page to wipe off paint on this project I was doing, because I wasn't really sure, how do you finish up a sketchbook? How do you finish up a sketchbook that has all this life in it? And I couldn't. Like, how do you choose that subject for the very last page? So I just started doing what I do, which is just start making brush marks. And then at the very end, I thought, that's what I want to do, is put a quote on top of all that mess that I just made. So I have a favorite Henri Matisse quote. It reads, "It has bothered me all of my life that I do not paint like anybody else." And I don't know how you feel about that quote, but that quote makes me feel like art is truly for everyone. If Matisse could feel this frustration that whenever he looked at someone else's painting, it made him compare it back to his own, then it's okay, because I do that too. And I need to know that that's just a normal part of the creative process, to take a look at other people's work and compare it back to our own. Just like I probably didn't want to share this right away because other people's sketchbooks look amazing, and this one definitely, I'm not saying it doesn't. There are some pages I really like in here and I think I'm really proud of. I'm actually really proud of the whole book, but it doesn't look like anyone else's. It looks like mine. So that's the last page of my very first sketchbook that I ever finished. Of course, the last page has a stain. So there you have it. Thanks for watching.